So recently, Bill Watterson, the creator of Calvin and Hobbes, put out this new book called The Mysteries, and I didn't hear about this because I don't really keep up to date with Bill Watterson because he hasn't put anything out in 30 years or whatever. So everyone just kind of assumed that he was done, and then all of a sudden he puts out this new book. And it's really weird because it's the type of book that would only really be it's like one of those old picture books like freaking, the Polar Express or what's it called, Jumanji, or what's the sci-fi spin-off of Jumanji, like Zadar or whatever that was called. I remember I used to play the board game for the sci-fi spin-off of Jumanji. It was a pretty good board game, actually. Anyway, this new Bill Watterson book is like that. It's like the Polar Express. It's like a picture book with like these illustrations and just like text on the opposite page. And it's not drawn by Bill Watterson. It's based off some shit he was doing like a decade ago. And he doesn't even draw it. He just writes it. And then some other guy does the illustrations. And it's been a long, hard, bitter road, a tough one to swallow. But I've come to the realization, actually, that like Bill Watterson is seriously overrated as far as cartoonists go. I used to be a huge fucking fan of Calvin and Hobbes. I bought every Calvin and Hobbes book. I was like crazy about Calvin and Hobbes. I was like, this is the funniest shit ever. Holy shit. Calvin, what a mischievous little rascal. What a little bastard playing his pranks and shit. But then I realized around like 10 or so, I was like, hey, why is there never a Calvin and Hobbes strip in any of the daily newspapers? I looked at Denver Post, and I scanned the comics page up and down. You got the shitty Blondie reruns and the crappy Spaz and the non sequitur and Pearls Before Swine and all this. And I was like, where the fuck's Calvin and Hobbes? Because Calvin and Hobbes is like such a great comic strip. And then I learned that like Bill Watterson stopped Calvin and Hobbes in like fucking the 90s or whatever. And I was just like, shit, What a terrible role model for so many aspiring cartoonists to base their behavior off of. This weird recluse who hasn't drawn in 30 years. And to me, that just is not the best or most exemplary example of a cartoonist to take an inspiration from. This guy who just like makes a shit ton of money off his intellectual property and then sits around on it and doesn't do jack shit with these two characters who, like, all things considered, are pretty damn well developed. I'll give him that. Calvin and Hobbes is like a decent strip. Even today, I have to admit that. But just stopping drawing for so long, and now it's like he probably can't even fucking draw anymore because he hasn't drawn for so long. And he always tells this story of like, oh well, the newspapers, it was me versus them, the little guy versus the big guys. Oh damn, those damn newspaper editors. Well, simultaneously, like, seemingly ignoring the potential of independent print media back then and especially now. I mean, it's even easier to print stuff now, but it was easy to print a great independently published comic back then. And I just feel like his misleading narrative of like the only way you can do things is through the newspapers and you've got to get your comic strip syndicated. That's a really weird, archaic model for cartoonists to take. And I just feel like so many people going into the industry thinking that the only way they can do it is with daily comic strips in a major line of newspapers. That's how I used to think I was going to enter comics, is like just daily comic strips, and I kind of formulated my work around that, and I made a lot of little comic strips when I was younger. And then I realized I just liked comic books more because they were more capable of telling long form narratives and character development and like that. And so I kind of forgot about wanting to do comic strips. I do respect comic strips as a medium, but they're very different from comic books. But you can even publish like independent comic strips. That's a thing. Independent comic strips are a thing, just in independent newspapers rather than the big city name newspapers that, just like Garfield. Why would you even want to share the same page with Garfield if you have so much integrity? And in terms of great like comic strips, in terms of who I think more cartoonists should aim to emulate instead of Bill Watterson, because he really is just an example of just like a terrible work ethic and not motivational. There's nothing motivational about his story because he's reclusive, he's bitter. Some people say he's not grumpy or bitter, but I just don't know how you can be a fucking comics hermit for that long, not drawing anything, not making anything. I don't think Bill Watterson is felt joy in so long. Like, as a cartoonist, as someone who actually gives a shit about comics as a medium, I can't imagine not drawing comics for 30 plus fucking years. That must be insane. That must be, like, wild how anyone could go through that suffering. But the example that I would suggest more cartoonists follow is Charles M. Schulz. He did Peanuts for 50 fucking years. Not just 10 years like Bill Watterson did with Calvin and Hobbes. And Charles Schulz wasn't like, ooh, I'm done. My vision is fulfilled. Bye. And then make off with a bunch of fucking bags of cash. Charles M. Schulz earned his fucking reputation, earned his status by creating characters who, all things considered, are more well-developed and fleshed out and hold up way, way better than Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin and Hobbes is a product of its time. It really is. Like, it has all these dated pop culture references, and Peanuts just doesn't have that. Peanuts is fucking timeless. It'll stand forever because all of it is just so prescient. It's so well drawn. Like, every panel is superb. Its humor is so subtle, and the chemistry between the characters, like, holy shit, it's fantastic. And I often hear that Calvin and Hobbes was like heavily inspired by Peanuts. That kind of shows. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a ripoff or anything, but if you're going to like read a great comic strip, just read Peanuts. Just read the whole line from the 50s with like Shermie, and then up until 2000. It stayed good. Like, it wasn't as good by the end, but because Charles M. Schulz was still drawing and writing it, unlike Jim Davis, who's the Garfield guy, and he just has like a big staff of like 50 fucking people at Paws Incorporated drawing every Garfield strip. He probably hasn't drawn a Garfield strip in like 30 fucking years. Or Scott Adams, is just a giant right-wing racist piece of shit, just a giant capitalist fetishizer, and Dilbert fucking sucks as a character. I've never liked Dilbert. Unlike Scott Adams or Jim Davis, who are like really scummy examples of cartoonists, I think more cartoonists, instead of turning to Bill Watterson as a role model, as like this mysterious reclusive genius or whatever, because he's still living. He could, if he wanted to, give like advice to young cartoonists, try and teach them about the medium, be a helpful mentor in the field. But he doesn't do any of that. He just sits in his little hermit shack all day and acts all mysterious. And I think that's coward behavior, and I'm gonna call it out, But Charles Schulz, not only did he answer most of the letters he got when he was alive, but he observed a ritual that a lot of cartoonists back in the day would observe that for whatever reason is not observed as much anymore, and that is drawing your final comic strip on your fucking deathbed. And that's fucking lit. My favorite cartoonist of all time, E.C. Seeger, when he died of lung cancer in the 30s, he drew the last Thimble Theater strip on his fucking deathbed because he knew he was dying, and he was like, well, I'm going to leave a legacy behind. I'm going to finish this and go out on a strong note. And it was the same with Charles M. Schulz. The last Peanut strips are really sketchy and weird because you can tell his hand is getting shaky, and he's getting really, really old. He's really getting up there. But he's like, I'm going to keep drawing Charlie Brown and Peppermint Patty and Snoopy, and then I'm going to die. And there's just something so admirable and cool about that, and badass, to just keep drawing your characters till you die, and then no one else is gonna draw your characters, but it's just a nice little reassurance that you had the final say over what they did. There's something just so freaking admirable about that. And when I compare Charles M. Schulz's legacy and practices and work ethic to Bill Watterson, I'm just like, how do so many people take this Bill Watterson guy seriously? He just drew a comic for 10 years. Like, how do you stop drawing after 10 years and not draw for 20 years? That's just like so sad. It's like if a pro in any other field, Gordon Ramsay, just drops the rolling pin tomorrow. He's like, nope, I'm gonna just live in my mansion for the next 30. I'm not gonna cook. I'm not gonna be a chef anymore. Most people will be like, yo, Gordon, what the fuck? This is your life. This is your passion. It's what you do. You make foods. But he's just like, nope, not gonna do it anymore. Not gonna shout it at the restaurant owners anymore. Just go and hide away from society and become a weirdo. And for some reason, when Bill Watterson does it, cartoonists are just like, yeah, that's cool. But it's not cool. There's nothing cool about it. And it was just something I've been wanting to say for a long time. Calvin and Hobbes is an okay strip. I read it. I liked it when I was younger. I bought all the shit. And, there's no merch of it. There's just like a calendar. Because Bill Watterson was like, I'm too good to merchandise my characters. And there's just something really pretentious and overbearing about that. And just like, I'm too good for this. I'm too good to make a Calvin mug, or you make a calendar. What's the difference between a calendar and a mug? A point being, it just got very difficult for me to get invested in Calvin and Hobbes after I was like 12, because there was no new material and I'd read all of it, and I just kept reading it over and over again, and I was like, yeah, it's not that deep. And then I grew out of my Calvin and Hobbes phase, but my Peanuts phase has never frickin' ended. I can read any frickin' Peppermint Patty and Schroeder and all that shit, and that never gets fucking old. Peanuts is a great strip, wonderful work. And I don't see Charles Schulz, I'm gonna draw this pretentious, or not draw it. I'm gonna hire an artist to draw this book, but I'm gonna write it, and it'll be like this pretentious, weird philosophical, frickin' book. It's not real philosophy, but it pretends like it is, and it's in the format of like the Polar Express, and it's like, it's a fable for adults. Just write a real book, or just make a children's book. Nobody needs this wishy-washy half and half. Oh, it's deep, except it's for adults, but it looks like the Polar Express. It's in a format of book that doesn't even fucking exist anymore. And that's what frickin' Scott Adams did with like God's Debris and shit. Just all this ponderous bullshit that just detracts from like the actual craft of comics. You write too much of this nonsense, and your head just gets up there, and suddenly you're not drawing comics anymore. You're just this like bitter recluse. And too many cartoonists go down that hole. And I'd say, if Scott Adams has gone down just like the fucking mental right-wing grifter pipeline to shit town, Bill Watterson's gone down the wacko hermit town to the train that never stops, and is just like perpetually annoying, and has a weird cult of people just going like, yeah, Bill Watterson, he's my hero. I just don't see him as my hero anymore. Charles M. Schulz all the fucking way, man. And for the record, it's The Girl in the Red Truck, Charlie Brown. That's a fucking classic. That is the best thing Charles M. Schulz ever made. He wanted it to be, and it absolutely fucking is. All-American classic. I like to see Bill Watterson make something as fucking tight as that. Man, that's a good fucking animated special. They don't make them like that anymore. Anyway, yeah. That's all I really had to say about this new Bill Watterson thing. I give Calvin and Hobbes these days. I'd give it like a 5.5 out of 10. I give Peanuts a 10 out of 10. It's just that freaking good. Read Peanuts, seriously. Great work. Okay, bye.